Hello, I'm Chris Williams, and I'm here with a review of Spider-Man Life Story Issue 2. This time it's going to be set in the 70s. And we'll start off with the cover, which was done by Chip Zdarsky. I thought he was just a writer. I thought he could only write. His Spider-Man isn't so bad. It's good. But I would prefer if it was a closer shot of a Spider-Man doing something instead of Spider-Man holding a disco ball-sized goblin bomb. But it's a good cover, if a bit boring. It's certainly orange. Every issue in this series has a cover with its most prominently one color. And I think these covers are rather forgettable. They're good. They're drawn well, but they're not all that great. They're just forgettable. And the first page is, once again, we start out with Marvel giving us a page listing who worked on this comic book and the title of this particular issue. Spider-Man Life Story, Chapter 2, Our Father's Way. I didn't put the whole cover into it because I thought this entire page was just boring. Yeah, I think it would be more interesting trying to figure out what the name of this particular issue is. And we start out with the first page with Spider-Man at a graveyard. He is speaking to someone's grave, and at first you think it's Uncle Ben, but wait a moment, you'll get a surprise. That's when his wife, Gwen Stacy Parker, comes up behind him and starts talking to him. Gwen says to Peter that she got off work early, and she knew he would probably be at this grave this particular day because he likes to visit Eugene Flash Thompson's grave on the day he died, April 16th, 1974. And we find out that Flash died in the Vietnam War, and apparently they must have shipped his body back here. Well, of course that is. I thought they would have left him over in Vietnam and buried him there. Occasionally they did that. And it's been 3 years since Flash died, so it's 1977. Here we can see Peter Parker looking at the Daily Bugle, and he sees that the war has escalated. They see that Giant Man has added his efforts to the war effort, while we see a camouflaged Iron Man, while Captain America continues to save lives on both sides of the conflict. Basically leaving off what happened in the end of last issue. They don't really go much into the war in this issue, and it's just basically a filler, I kind of consider it. Here we see that Peter Parker is working for Reed Richards and a reformed Octo Octavius. Whether Dr. Octo Octavius. He brings them coffee and they reminisce about how their research is going and that they're improving the world. While Peter has a problem with Reed Richards, even though they are helping people, he feels like they're not doing enough because Reed Richards insists on hoarding technology that's too advanced from the rest of the world. Now we switch over to Harry Osborn, who's come to a prison to visit his father, Norman Osborn. He greets his son with a kind of an insult, but he says to his son he's sorry. It's just that he's been in prison so long. That prison just brings the worst out of you. And we can see the artwork here by Mark Bagley is very good. God, I love his artwork. I mean, it is good artwork. One of the best comic series that Marvel's currently putting out, in my opinion, is a Spider-Man Life Story. I think there are a few others, but I'll just say that Mark Bagley is really doing a job here. Well, Norman Osborn tells Harry that he wants him to look into something he's had planned and that he doesn't want Spider-Man to interfere with it. And we switch over to Peter Parker, who is currently talking with Gwen Stacy. Apparently, she's working for Professor Warren, Peter Parker's and, well, Gwen Stacy's old professor. Here, she works in a cloning lab, and they've done stuff like create artificial limbs, especially for the Kurt Connors, the original Lizard. They made a new arm for him after Peter cured him of being the Lizard. And we see Professor Warren giving the evil eye to the young couple as they walk out the door for the night. Now, if you know his secret identity, you know who he really is. He hasn't become that supervillain yet, but he will after this issue. I gotta say, Professor Warren is drawn particularly well. Mark Bagley drew him pretty well with that kind of almost menacing, he's trying not to look completely menacing look in Professor Warren's eye. Later on in the issue, a new goblin appears, the Black Goblin. And, he's become to Professor Warren's lab because this is the thing that Norman told Harry that he wanted him to investigate. He wanted to know why Warren hasn't delivered the promised goods to Norman Osborn. But then suddenly Spider-Man interferes, punching the Black Goblin away, pushing Professor Warren from his, soon-to-be very painful death at the hands of the Black Goblin. Don't worry, Warren lives, even though later on in this issue you kind of think he should have died right there. Here we see Spider-Man in his new costume. His 70s costume, apparently. Apparently he's added technology and metal to it. It's kind of a bad-looking costume, at least in my opinion. They continue the fight when suddenly the Black Goblin's goblin bombs blow one of the walls out, and they see something that freezes their breath in their chests. All we can see is Gwen Stacy looking in open horror at what she's looking at. Spider-Man says this can't be. And what has Professor Warren done with that evil look in his eye, knowing he's been found out? It turns out he's made clones of not only Norman Osborn, Peter Parker, and Gwen Stacy. He's apparently been planning something. Harry, who is actually a Black Goblin, knows about the Norman clone, but he didn't know about the Peter clone or the Gwen Stacy clone. And he says, Professor Warren says, I can explain. Tough luck, Buster. I'd like to see how you explain this. When Harry goes a bit nuts, he thinks his father wanted a clone of Peter Parker because he always wanted a genius for his son, because he always wanted Peter to follow in Norman's footsteps. And he continues to scream at Spider-Man, saying, it's always about you. It's always... And while Spider-Man says, Harry, don't. And it's always about you. You took the love of my father away from me. He always wanted you. Later on, as they continue to argue, Peter drills some sense into Harry's head, and Harry just decides to destroy the clones. He throws a couple of pumpkin bombs at them. And this will have repercussions for everyone in this issue for the rest of their lives. And the bombs fall, and you see the clones sleeping, and you know it's going to be bad. Now, this really doesn't make much sense, because if that's a clone of Norman Osborn, what happens is that the Spider-Man clone survives, Peter goes back to save them, but the other clones are dead. And the Norman Osborn should have been able to survive too, because the reason that Peter's clone survived was because he was superhuman. Why didn't Norman's clone survive? See, Norman was going to use him to pin his crimes on. Here, we see that Professor Warren says that he's angry that his clones have been killed because that clone that was in the tube, that wasn't Gwen Stacy. That was the original Gwen Stacy. The Gwen we've been following has actually been the clone. She is dead now, devastating Peter because his life has been completely destroyed. Warren goes to prison, and Harry Osborn disappears. His wife, Mary Jane, decides to stay with Peter because Peter Parker says he has nothing. His life is gone. His life is gone. And this is how the issue ends, with most likely Peter now going to marrying Mary Jane Watson Parker. Mary Jane Watson. Now, she's going to be Mary Jane Watson Parker in the next issue. The issue ends on a sad note. This was a great issue. It was really good. I thought it had problems, but it was good. Now, if you like this review, subscribe. Make sure you're still subscribed. If you're watching my videos but you're not subscribed to me, please subscribe to me. I want you to get all my notifications. And by the way, hit that bell for notifications and leave some comments down below. And remember, keep checking back in future videos for more information on my own independent comic book, Scumdogs. I'm Chris Williams, and I'm done for the day. I'll see you guys all tomorrow.